I want to talk about Palworld for a second. I think the Palworld thing's really interesting. So if you need your memory refreshed, Palworld is like this game that was sold as like it's like a Pokemon ripoff kind of thing. But but then you get shots of like the Pokemon and they're like on an assembly line and they're making realistic machine guns and stuff. And you're like, what is this about? So the game came out. It is absurdly successful. I'm honestly really shocked at just how successful it's been. And like something like 3 million sales in 3 days, like really crazy numbers. Really crazy high numbers for a game from a relatively obscure studio. I hadn't really heard of them before this. But yeah, I thought the concept was kind of intriguing. You know, Pokemon made by people who aren't Pokemon is always interesting to me because I have long had a thing. I feel like Pokemon is the worst version of those. I feel like Pokemon is the worst at being Pokemon in terms of what I like or what's appealing to me about it. So, I don't know, genuinely Palworld looked pretty interesting, but there's been this controversy around the designs of the monsters themselves. So if you don't know, Palworld is this game. You're on the ground, you play a little you've got a little character, and you can catch these pals, these monsters, these rip-off Pokemon, and you can catch them. They have all these different abilities and elements and themes and stuff like that, and there's a whole Pokédex type thing, and then you can basically enlist these pals to use their unique abilities to do, like, work for you. So you got, like, a fire one, and it's powering a furnace kind of thing. There's ones that are, mining in the earth. It's like Pokemon, but with like realistic capitalism applied. Exploitative capitalism of animals, right? Which is kind of a fun concept that never gets explored that much in Pokemon. So I was like, oh, that's neat. All right. But the designs, I looked at them, and even just seeing the trailer and not like really delving that deeply, I was like, yeah, a lot of these just seem kind of like rip-off Pokemon. Some of them look cool. There's been this big controversy around so-called plagiarism. I don't know if... and I don't know. Perhaps this is a hot take. Perhaps this is a disagreeable thing. Wow, it is raining really hard outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But Palworld is, for the most part, I don't know the full extent of it, but, like, fine. I was looking... Okay, so there's a couple articles on the apparent plagiarism and rip-off Pokemon designs, which, first off, if you just want to make a game with rip-off Pokemon, I don't, like, really think that that's too big of an issue. Especially... because it's like a completely different game. So that's the first thing that really makes this seem like kind of a non-issue to me, which is that Palworld does have some Pokemon elements, like the gameplay elements. There's the monsters and there's the catching. But what I discovered is that Palworld actually isn't aiming... Its main source of inspiration isn't actually Pokemon. Pokemon's just kind of a bolted, like an add-on. Not a bolt-on, but, it's just kind of like a mashup of the actual base of the game, which is the actual thing it's ripping off is RimWorld, which is why it's called Palworld. And, not just RimWorld, it's also building off of their previous game called Craftopia, which has similar kind of gameplay and systems. And so it's like, is this really infringing on Pokemon's, like, territory? Outside of the monster catching stuff, it's a pretty different product with a very different appeal. It's not like an RPG battler. It works very differently. Like, as a game, I feel like it has a completely different market to it. Secondly, I feel like a lot of the plagiarism accusations are a little overblown. To be clear, some of them are extremely blatant. Some of them are like, oh, you took that Pokemon and you kind of changed its shape. And you added a little doodad to the head or something. Some of them are very blatant and have merit to them. Other ones, I feel like are a lot of the ones, excuse me, that I've seen feel like real stretches. Like, okay, there's like a sheep pal, right? And oh, it's ripping off the Wooloo from Pokemon. Wait till these people see sheep. I hate to break it to you, but the Wooloo was not a terribly original design in the first place. Or, oh, this one has a kind of similar shape. Or, oh, this pal has like a fluffy tail. Look at this Pokemon with a fluffy tail. And you hit a point where it's like, there's like over 1,000 Pokemon. I would be shocked if you could even make a game with a similar like monster catching premise that didn't have a ton of overlap with Pokemon in like little, like really some nitpicky things. Honest, like there were other things like there's a Video Game Chronicle article, and the cover photo is there's this pal that it has like, it's like a cat. It's like this purple cat, and it's got a these yellow eyes and this sort of sharp tooth grin. And apparently there's like, I think it's like an Alolan form of Meowth or whatever that is also like a kind of darkly colored cat with yellow eyes and a sharp tooth grin. And I was like, that's just the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. That's just a thing that's existed, like a cat with yellow eyes and a big smile has existed since, when did those books come out? How old are they? That's definitely something. Hang on. Alice in Wonderland book. Is it 51? No, 1865. 51 was like the movie. 1865. So, I mean, that's just, and specifically the Palworld one is a lot closer to the Cheshire Cat being like purple and all, which is okay. What? Fine. Again, some of them are blatant. Like, okay, there's one, I don't know what what's that? It's like the owl sniper from Pokemon. There's a pal that looks really similar to that. There's one that looks really similar to, I can't remember the name. It's a grass type. It looks kind of like a brontosaurus. And, yeah. A lot of them really do just feel like, yeah, I don't know, they both had their takes on like fantasy hedgehogs. Yeah, they look like hedgehogs. Some of them are very overly defensive. Now, the other part of the accusation is that the suspicion that these designs were created using generative AI, okay, well, first of all, so here, where does that come from? It comes from the fact that the company CEO is really into AI, which is a cause for concern, and that's fair. At the same time, there is no proof that the game was actually made using generative AI. It kind of just feels like a ripoff. Like, that's it. At most, it's just Pokemon ripoffs in a completely different context and setting. If it was created with generative AI, I think that and there was like proof of this, then sure. Well, that would be a different situation. But there's no real proof of that, as I've said like 3 times, like a broken record. But hey, you know what? Let's say you're concerned about using generative AI, and let's say it's even proven, right? Cool. Just pirate it. Literally just don't support them financially. If you don't like the way that something was produced and you don't want to give them money, if you don't want to give the creators money to show any kind of support for it, you can just pirate it if you still want to engage with it. It's fine. If you just want to try it out to see for yourself, you can just pirate it. It's totally cool with me. I think you should be comfortable with that. I think piracy might not have to. I don't think it's necessarily a great thing if it's like the first option for everyone for everything, but I think it's something that more consumers should understand is an option to them that's on the table, right? Like, hey, we wanted to watch The Flash to laugh at it. We didn't want to go spend money to see it, to support it. So we just pirated it. We just watched a shitty cam rip. And like, yeah, I would not have, after watching it, I still am glad. I'm glad that we did. I'm glad that we pirated it. That's it. Like, I don't have an ethical problem with piracy, and I don't think most people should either, to be honest. Yeah. That's my thoughts. Do I have anything else to say on Palworld? I don't know. It looks neat. It looks kind of interesting. Looks like it could be fun. And to be honest, some of the designs I looked at, like that Anubis Lucario, I was like, that's a cool design. That's a cool looking creature. It's a ripoff, but like I think it's cooler. Here's the thing, like if it's good, I don't really mind that much. Because it's like good, if it's good and it's different, I don't really care. Like, I love JoJo, and you could easily look at like Phantom Blood, right? You could easily look at like the first 30, 40-ish chapters, even into like Battle Tendency, right? And you could easily look at that and just say, oh, that's like a Fist of the North Star ripoff. And you're not entirely wrong. Like, Araki was very much following the trends of the time, and Jonathan is like kind of a ripoff Kenshiro. Honestly, kind of a blatant ripoff of Kenshiro. But JoJo's is like, it's even from the beginning, in actual content, is very much its own thing, and it's got its own appeal to it, and eventually turned into a totally unique series with totally unique ideas that were influential on its own. And if this developer, God, what are the name? Pocket something? What are they called? Pocket whatever. Pocket something. What was I saying? If they want to take one of their old games and iterate on it and add like a thing to be kind of, to make it more interesting, this like creature catching element to it, and they take a bunch of design inspiration and ripoff from like Pokemon, and they make not Pokemon, and they put into a totally different game, and the game is like good and the designs are neat, I don't really care that much. This is how stuff gets made. I don't know. Like, this is how new stuff happens. Stuff is iterative. I don't think it's that big of a deal. There were some concerns that I saw over directly stealing from fan art, which I don't know if that's super substantial. Some of them I saw was like, no, that's not like a grass type themed elephant monster. And I saw like 2 examples of that, and I was like, those really don't look the same. But outside of just the premise of a grass type elephant. There's one that's like kind of like a witchy Firefox design, which I think is probably the closest one. And if it is based off of fan art, that isn't cool. And that would be, I would condemn that. Oops. Just because that's like an independent artist, and having your design jacked for a game kind of sucks. But is it different? Ooh. Let's question me for a second. Why is it different when Pokemon? Well, the problem is that it's like, if it looks pretty direct. It looks pretty direct. If you're just like taking the literal design, then I don't think that that's cool. But like doing nothing to change it, like nothing at all. Yeah, I think that's where I draw the line. But pretty much every single one of the Pokemon designs is like, or like the Pokemon ripoffs are different in some way at the very least. Yeah. If they actually took fan-made artwork and just ripped it off one-to-one, that's not cool. But if there are actual like changes and differences and some kind of creative filtering performed by real humans, then I just don't really have that much of a problem with it. And again, it's a completely different type of game. Like it's really not competing with Pokemon. I don't think it's going to cut into their sales at all. I don't think it's going to cut into their part of the market. I think it's fair. I mean, I love Vampire Survivors. Vampire Survivors used a ton of just like traced art of just other like, here's a render of Bayonetta that we traced over with our own character. But it's a completely different kind of game. It's just like a big mashup of shit. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it because I'm okay with people taking something and just altering it and making it their own thing. And it's up to you where you draw the line and when something becomes its own thing, quote unquote. And if you disagree with me, I can totally see that. I see the case for it, but that's just my stance on it. I think I'm pretty consistent on that. Palworld, Friend World, Rimjob World. So